So, okay. So, welcome everybody to Sleep and the Wizards of Sleep from the University of Warwick, led their research team on sleep and pain, led by Nicole Tang, and they will introduce themselves shortly. First of all, just to do a little welcome, not only to yourselves, but actually to the crucial thing about how to use Zoom. I mentioned already it's important to be on mute at all times. We're very keen for you to ask questions, and please use the chat function, which is in the toolbar in the middle at the bottom. Obviously, write any questions or queries or comments in that chat function, and Anne Livingston, who's with us as a festival team volunteer, is going to help shape the questions for the Warwick team. We're more than happy if you want to keep your camera off or on, and we're more than happy for you to do anything that makes this session comfortable, stretches, breathing, a wander around, and so on. We emphasize the importance of regular movement stretches so that you don't stay in one place and get very stiff and more painful. You can change your views from the gallery view in the top right hand corner, and once we're off screen share, we'll want it to be on a speaker view, and as already said, we've shared it's going to be recorded and posted on the festival website, on the My Live Well with Pain website after the event. So big welcome to everybody in what is proving to be a 12-month long festival for people with pain, celebrating ways to live well with pain, to experiment, discover, and find out more how a co-production of people with pain working with clinicians can share things that maybe enhance our ways of living with pain. We're very lucky to have support not only from the website, but also from the Physiotherapy Pain Association and many other clinicians who've enabled this session and other sessions for this year to happen. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to introduce Nicole Tang and her team and hand over to them for the rest of the session this evening. The session itself is divided into 3 parts. Nicole is going to introduce the team and share more about understanding sleep and its relationship to pain and its relationship to sleep. So really crucial stuff here. And Nicole has been working in this area for quite some time and is breaking frontiers in the research on this to help us all. And she's got a great team of young researchers who have joined us. They will follow up with helping us to understand a little bit more about tracking sleep, understanding what that's all about, why you would do it, and how it might help. And then the third session will be mini session will be explaining about the trial work they're doing with what's called the Within trial. And if you'd like to participate in helping other people who've got pain and sleep issues, you may be interested in what they're doing and even become a volunteer. So last thing to say is do keep putting your questions, your queries, your comments in the chat all the way through. We've got 2 specific allotted times for this particular opportunity to engage with the team. And at this point, can I say thank you to them, and can I hand over to Nicole and the team?
Of course. Thank you, Frances. Hello, everyone. Very good to see so many of you on this hot summer day. I am Nicole Tang from the University of Warwick, but I have to say that I would like to introduce you to our team, because this session today is going to be a group effort, and I've got Dr. Christy Temela, our postdoctoral scientist on the team, Jenna Gillette, our PhD researcher, and Paige Caradat, our research assistant on the Within project. So they've spent quite some time preparing the slide and preparing some interactive activities with you. So talking about interactive activity, we will actually start with a poll so that we get to know who is in the audience and what sort of sleep status do you have. So have a glance of this session plan, so that will give you an idea what is to come next. And if you look at the next slide, you will be able to see the first poll. So participation in this poll is completely voluntary. And if you do provide us the data, it won't be recorded and it will remain anonymous. But we just thought that it will be fun and a little bit more interactive so that we get to know you. Okay, so I think Jenna can now open the poll. If you don't mind. Okay, so using the VFox, you can try and enter all the answers that apply to you. And maybe we can close the poll in 10 seconds if you're using VFox. I'm not sure if it works, but hopefully it does. If not, then we can just do a very simple show of hands.
I think we're working.
Excellent. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. Let's see. Let's see what is the representation of the different communities here. That's interesting. We've got quite a number of researchers, probably because of us. So it may be not the true picture of what's happening. But we do have quite a few service users, representatives here, and healthcare professionals. So it's good to have a good mix of different community representatives. So shall we try the next one since it's working? Okay. Oh, next slide, Jenna, please. Okay, so this question is about your sleep. We've got 6 options here. Again, select all that apply. We just want to find out about your sleep status. Okay, we will be closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Okay. It's quite a few different issues with the sleep. I think mainly is the sleep quality, being quite restless, not so good, and waking up from sleep. And I have to say that this is quite representative of the sort of clinical picture that we have established from our clinical and research work. For me, I'm actually quite interested in how many people will take the option. I am like a cat. I always sleep. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, because if you are sleeping like a cat, maybe some of what I'm going to talk about may not be so relevant to you. But I'm hoping that today will give you something, no matter what your sleep status is and what is your professional or just personal capacity is. We would like to give you something about sleep to take home with. Okay, so if we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so let me just start with what is sleep. Depending on your perspective, sleep could be many things. Quite simply, because sleep is something that you can observe, quite a lot of scientists will call it a behavioral state, which is a behavior. So if it is a behavior, we can think of it as a habit. But these days, because of the so many things that we do in the 24 hours of a day, sleep has been slowly becoming a luxury. Once upon a time in the 1970s, a very famous sleep scientist in the University of Chicago, Alan Rashaford, he has actually said that because the way how sleep occupies our daily life, taking up a third of our life, so let's say if your lifespan is 75 years, you could well be spending 25 years of your life sleeping. So if it is taking so much of your time, it would be an evolutionary mistake if sleep doesn't really serve a function. So that really challenges us in terms of our perception of what sleep is. Sleep isn't really a very passive state in the night when it is all quiet. When we are sleeping, our brain is doing quite a lot of things in the background. So from the research that people have carried out in the last couple of decades, we have slowly come to realize that sleep actually serves many, many different functions, from conserving energy to healing our wounds, helping us to feel more restored, rejuvenated, also like clearing some toxins from the brain. And in terms of our day-to-day learning and functioning, sleep also helps us to learn, to remember things, to forget things, and also to help us to regulate our feelings. If you think about sleep across the whole animal kingdom, you may notice a few things about sleep. First of all, across the different species, we do have very different expressions of sleep. If you look at the pictures here, you can see some funny pictures. We've got a flamingo sleeping on one leg, a brown bat sleeping upside down, a panda trying to sleep up high to prevent predators and to try to get a nicer view, perhaps. Dolphin, and some funny facts about dolphin because they sleep with one side of the brain at a time and they alternate the hemisphere that is involved in their sleep. And they can sleep and swim at the same time. For giraffe, it is known to be a very short sleeper, sleeping only about 2 hours a day. And for the owl here, the baby owl, they sleep face down. Do you know why? It's because the head is too heavy. They sleep facing down. So it's kind of funny, but when you observe the sleep behavior across the animal kingdom, it is actually quite a few interesting discovery for us. And if you're thinking about sleep need across the different species, different kinds of animals will have different kinds of sleep needs. I've mentioned giraffe being a very short sleeper. Brown bat, on the other hand, sleep most time of the day. We human is somewhere in the middle, so sleeping about 8 hours per day. So talking about the way how we relate human sleep with animal sleep is actually quite the same. A lot of the sleep research is actually developed from studies with fruit flies, studies with rats, mice, and rodents of all kinds. If you look at the sleep behavior of humans, you can see that we also opt for our own interesting habitat, environment for sleeping, different ways of sleeping, with babies splitting the legs, showing off their flexibility, and with workers in the office trying to hide their head like an ostrich when they're sleeping. This is actually called the ostrich pillow, by the way. And also, for me, when I'm teaching at the university, I've seen quite a few students sleeping in the class, but luckily for them, I am usually very supportive of them sleeping in the class. It's really important for their developmental needs. Okay, so as you can see here, for us, human, our sleep needs changes with age. So it's not surprising that you may have noticed quite a few changes of your sleep pattern as you get a little bit older and wiser. It is just simply the sort of developmental need of different stages of our life. Okay. The other thing about sleep is that it changes depending on the context. So even in the animal world, if we go back to what we can learn from them, it's very interesting to find out that we can actually adapt our sleep pattern so that we can survive even when we are not sleeping very well, even when we are not claiming the sort of normal quota of daily sleep. Some examples that I've cited here based on science is that if we look at migratory bird, I don't know if anybody here like bird watching, but you may notice that migratory birds don't stop. They can fly for weeks after weeks and sometimes even months without stopping. When they are on a mission, they're unstoppable. I've already mentioned the funny behavior about dolphins sleeping with just one hemisphere. The other interesting thing is killer whales. I don't know if any of you know that when killer whales has given birth to a calf, they will just keep swimming for weeks without sleeping. So that is quite interesting. And that sort of gives us some thinking about what sleep is for, and also the plasticity and adaptability of the way how we adjust our sleep pattern in order to fit with different responsibility and different environments we find ourselves in. For a lot of you here, living with chronic pain, I completely understand that it could be quite difficult and challenging to go to sleep. Here we are showing you a quote from a female patient talking about pain and comorbid insomnia. I'll just let you read, but essentially it is talking about chronic pain being a trigger of exhaustion. And The combination of chronic pain and insomnia could be torturing, and it could affect you emotionally, physically, and mentally at all levels. So it is really difficult, and we understand that it is not easy to live with both chronic pain and not sleeping. We've learned that from research, knowing that the impact of chronic pain affects not just what you do during the day, but also sleeping at night. It can cause a lot of trouble. And if we use standardized instruments like the Insomnia Severity Index that you can see on the next slide, you'll be able to see that when we try to systematically survey different populations, different groupings of patients at different kind of clinic, we will be able to see a progression. So as the chronic pain becomes more severe, as you need more specialist treatment, you will probably be seeing a higher concentration of patients with clinical insomnia. So with that being established, that sleep disturbance is a very common problem among people living with pain, we really do need to understand the relationship between pain and sleep. So in the past, there's one view thinking that pain is the trigger of sleep, and which is true because we have observed that acute pain can cause arousal. And even in an experimental setting, when we introduce painful stimuli to our participant, we'll be able to wake them up. This is not really rocket science because if you pinch your sleep partner, probably you will get a reaction, right? So pain is essentially a form of arousal that can wake people up naturally. And also, from epidemiological study, we have come to learn that chronic pain would increase the chances of people to have an onset of insomnia. And that is when we do survey for a representative sample of the population. But as we do more and more research, we have come to learn that sleep actually have an influence on pain too. And so that makes the pain and sleep relationship a bidirectional relationship, or you can call it a reciprocal relationship. Because once again, in experiment, when we introduce acute sleep deprivation over a few nights, or when we try to fragment people's sleep, try to wake them up forcefully, to mimic the sort of sleep disturbance that sometimes people with chronic pain would experience, we do notice that even in this healthy, pain-free young adult, they would show a pattern of increased sensitivity. They would report more pain, more inflammation. When we check their blood, they have more inflammatory marker. When we do some pain testing with them, we know that the pain habituation and sensitization will be changed. And also importantly, something that's happening within our body is that the natural pain defense within our body will get weakened. So sleep has an influence on the way how we perceive our pain and also the amount of energy that we have to manage our pain. In the long run, we have seen in studies with longer term follow-ups, poor sleep early on can actually predict the disease progress of various pain conditions. And here I'm just listing a few representative studies of different kinds of chronic pain conditions and also different periods of follow-up duration to show that even years later on, if you do have insomnia, at the baseline, you are much more likely to develop a new chronic pain condition. So that gives us an idea. Sleep could be an alternative treatment entry point. So even though pain may be the trigger of sleep disturbance, it actually makes sense to look after our sleep, to prioritize it so that you get a chance to have better pain management. So it's really important to study sleep. So in the lab where we worked in Warwick, we can measure people's sleep using polysomnography. We can hook up people with electrodes on the brain, on the muscles, near the eyes, in order to generate some electrical signals so that we can tell which stage of sleep people are in. So here, I've got a diagram for you, and it is called a hypnogram. It may look complicated, but I will show you how to digest the information here. So on the left, you will be able to see the different sleep stages based on the electrical signal. So you have wakefulness on the top, REM sleep, which is the rapid eye movement sleep that is most often associated with dreaming. And then N1 and N2 sleep, they are the shallower stages of sleep. And then N3 sleep would be the deeper stage of sleep. So what you can see here is a timeline from 11 p.m. in the evening all the way up to 7 a.m. in the morning. So it sort of represents what happened in the night. What you can notice is that the way how sleep is being organized naturally, biologically, is that it goes through the different stages of sleep in a cyclical manner. Can you see that? So we've got a few cycles here, 4 or 5 cycles here, and you can see that in this hypothetical good sleepers case, you can see that sleep cycle through gradually from stage 1 to 2, 3, and then come back up, and then go up to wakefulness before the person plunges back to deeper stages of sleep. So from this graph, if we can go back to the graph, what we can generalize is that when we go to sleep, we tend to go through the different level of consciousness. And it is absolutely normal, and it is evolutionarily normal to have wakefulness during the night. So the idea of you fall asleep as soon as you hit a pillow and then you don't remember anything and then come back to wakefulness in the morning is sort of an unrealistic representation of sleep. There are biological advantages of us to have this cyclical manner of sleep stages throughout the night. Just think of our ancestors who are living in the wild, who need to have different sort of responsibility during night watch or making sure that we are safe. There is the purpose for us to be able to tune back into the external environment to make sure that we are safe. The other pattern that you can observe in this hypnogram is that the cycle gets a little bit longer, it gets stretched. So the constitution of different stages of sleep over the night is slightly different between the first half of the night and the second half of the night. So in the first half of the night, it has a much higher concentration of the deeper stages of sleep. And then in the second half of the night, it has a higher concentration of REM sleep, which is the stage of sleep associated with dreaming. So think of it this way, it is actually good news for some of us who are slightly shorter sleeper or occasionally having problems sleeping, because even when you don't have the full opportunity to sleep for 7 or 8 hours, as sometimes you get recommended for, you still get the most restorative sleep in the first half of the night. And it is just the way how sleep is biologically designed, and it is organized. Okay, so if we can, so this is just a slide of the summary of what I've talked about. If we can move on to the next one. Oh, I thought that I would just show you some real life data here. So here is just the hypnogram of myself testing a gadget. So as a sleep researcher, I love to test out different gadgets whenever they come onto the market. So this is a headband that will give me some signals of the different stages of sleep. I wouldn't say that I am a particularly bad sleeper, but as you can see here, I've got quite a few awakenings being detected by the headbands. And so the cycle is a lot messier. And it is actually really normal, because previously when I went to do polysomnography in a different research and clinical setting, I do have multiple awakenings. And I wouldn't say that my perception of my sleep quality is really bad. So it's really interesting to have that distinction, to understand that sleep is a multifaceted experience. So the way how you feel and experience of sleep sometimes could be very different from what you get to measure from gadgets and equipment. So how to measure sleep? There are different ways. As I said, technology has moved on quite a bit. Apart from using the paper version of interviews, questionnaires, and sleep diary, you can actually have the choice of accelerometer these days. These usually comes into the form like a watch, so you can wear that so that you can monitor your sleep and also monitor your physical activity. The two usually comes together because the technology actually based on the piezoelectric sensor within the watch that measure your physical activity. And it is from the physical activity that they derive the amount of sleep and the timing of your sleep for you. So it is an indirect measure of your sleep. So why should we be tracking our sleep? I think if you are up for it, there are a few advantages for tracking your sleep. First of all, with the data, you have got knowledge about your own sleep pattern. Knowledge is power. So if you want to do something about your sleep, you can actually utilize the data to inform you what you need to do. So this is an evidence-based approach for self-management of sleep. So you can observe your sleep pattern over time, looking at the time trend, or observe the effects of certain events or situation on your sleep pattern. So some of the new moms that I get to know, they sometimes track the sleep to see what is the impact of having a baby on their sleep. And I can tell you from my personal experience, it is tremendous. Yeah. So, and then using the data, sometimes you can share with people who can help you, who are in a position to help you do something about your sleep. For example, you can bring your data with you to the doctor, like Francis. You can talk to them about the data. I think you will welcome that, right? Bringing in the data so that you get some more information to help with your consultation. Okay. Next slide, please. However, we do understand that there are challenges of sleep tracking because buying these devices could be really expensive. It could easily set you back a few hundred quids. So it is a luxury to be able to do sleep monitoring. And also it requires patience because to get a representative set of data of your current sleep pattern, it requires patience. The recommended sort of monitoring period is about 2 weeks. So it really does take some effort in order to push through or to continue with your monitoring. A lot of people who have been given a monitoring device for, let's say, Christmas or for their birthday, and sometimes they will find a watch 2 months later on in a drawer and they have forgotten about it. So it does require patience and continual effort. And the final thing is sometimes with the data being presented in front of you, it could be mind-boggling. What do you do with the data? How do you interpret them? Sometimes some apps and programs will give you a sleep score, but I have to say that for us researcher, we do have difficulty to understand how they generate the sleep quality score and what does it actually mean and how accurate they are. And for the different parameters that they show you, you may not understand how to utilize them. So I thought that I would quickly just show you some of the key parameters, as we call key constructs or terms that we use when we try to reconstruct your sleep experience so that you get to see your data yourself. So the first thing that I would like to show you is a lot of the time we calculate the total time in bed. So that is the length of the time that you from jumping into the bed to getting out of bed. So if you, let's say, go to bed at 10 and then you wake up at 6 in the morning, your total time in bed would be 8 hours. And from the time when you switch off the light with the intention to go to sleep to the time when you actually doze off and fall asleep, we call that sleep onset latency here. So that is the amount of time that you have taken to fall asleep. And then we also look at the amount of wakefulness after sleep onset. So once you have started your sleep, how many times do you wake up? And altogether with your awakening, how long is your awakening after you've fallen asleep? And then knowing these duration, we can actually calculate the total sleep time. And then we can also work out your sleep efficiency. One of my past patients called the sleep efficiency index the mucking about figures. So that is like the amount of time in bed that you are asleep. So if you are mucking about quite often, that means that your sleep efficiency will go down. But if you are just sleeping in the bed, not having much wakefulness, your sleep efficiency will be quite high. And obviously, we can also monitor the sleep quality over time as well too, just to have a different perspective of the sleep experience. Usually, when we compare the data between people with chronic pain and people without chronic pain, we will notice that for the total time in bed among the chronic pain group, it tends to be longer compared to people who don't have chronic pain. And for the sleep onset latency and wake after sleep onset, they also tend to be longer and more frequent. And as a result of that, the total sleep time will be shorter and the sleep efficiency will be lower. And then sleep quality is usually reported to be poorer. It's really interesting that this pattern, whilst they are different from people without chronic pain, when we compare this kind of sleep pattern or patterns of sleep disturbance with people with just insomnia without chronic pain, they're actually pretty similar. So potentially, the two type of insomnia share some common mechanism that we can actually borrow some of the treatment idea from treatment for primary insomnia to to help people with chronic pain and sleep. So if you're interested, the sort of threshold that we're normally looking for normal sleep is that we will try to help people in treatment to achieve a sleep onset latency of less than 30 minutes. And also we will try to help people to control the wake after sleep onset to under 30 minutes. And the sort of sleep efficiency figure that we'll be looking at will be above 85%. So for normal sleepers, we're usually talking about something in the 80s, high 80s, and high 90s. Okay, so just bringing my session to a close, just want to summarize that we do realize that there are challenges with sleep monitoring. So it's actually quite important that you use sleep monitoring according to your purpose. You may want to consider whether or not it is worth the money to invest in a gadget. You may want to also think about what is the purpose of monitoring. And if you use it with purpose, you can confine the monitoring period to a shorter period of time so that it is not interfering with your day-to-day life. And I guess the baseline is that sleep monitoring shouldn't really be sleep interfering. In the next session, my team will actually talk to you a little bit more about the actual gadget use, the user experience, and also the validity and reliability of some of the measurements. One thing that you have to expect, though, is that none of these technologies is perfect. So do expect errors and use that with a pinch of salt. Okay, so with that, I will hand it over to the host, Francis, for the Q&A and comfort break.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Wow, what a lot of stuff's going on in our brains and our bodies when we're sleeping, and how when we're switched off and asleep, we actually really don't know what's going on. Fascinating. So thanks for revealing and sharing so far. The opportunity now is for a stretch, comfort break, and to ask Nicole some questions about sleep, understanding it, helping us understand a little bit more what she shared with us. So over to you, Anne. And do we have any questions coming through other than from myself?
Not at the moment, but one thing I picked up was that this take the data to the GP. How would a GP feel if you took in, your sleep pattern and said, I've been told that this sleep pattern is going to influence my chronic pain. What can you do about it?
Interesting question, Anne. Nicole, can you share with us your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I'm a psychologist. I don't know, but my guess is that it helps to speed up the process. My understanding is that GP doesn't really have a lot of time. And so you may as well save yourself 2 weeks of waiting by having done that in advance to say that, well, I feel that my sleep is not quite right. And it has been this pattern, at least for the last couple of weeks. And you can tell the GP whether or not it is representative of your normal sleep. And I guess with some data, it is helpful to generate the conversation. And if it warrants investigation, if we see a sleep efficiency as low as 50%, 60%, it does give the GP a signal that perhaps they should think harder about what they can offer you. In terms of pharmacological options, I'll leave it to Francis, but I do know that there are non-pharmacological options that we can refer people to for talking therapy, for a sleep program, or for some other programs that might be helpful. So that's my personal view from the psychological side of things, but maybe Francis wants to comment on it.
Yeah, I think there's an ongoing issue between patients turning up with data and engaging with GPs and the perception they'll have a negative outcome. I think you have to sell it positively to the clinician. I realize I have a problem. I'm wondering if you can help me. Could you help work with me to see what we can do as a result of my sleep diaries or my sleep monitoring, because it looks as if there are some issues and problems there. GPs will value that enormously because immediately they know where to focus rather than having the dance of where actually are we going in this conversation at the moment. Okay, it's how you put it across as a person with the problem. And I think it's really important that people phrase their questions, phrase their entry into this, and perhaps even practice it before they see their GP. Most of my colleagues would be thrilled, absolutely thrilled, that you're engaging in such a positive way. So there's some interesting questions coming through. Let's take one more and then we'll go to the team and then perhaps come back. Susie's picked up one. Go on.
No.
Yep. Go on, Anne. Over to you there again.
Well, I was just going to say that Nikki has said that she finds the monitoring can be counterproductive because it makes her focus on the problem rather than relaxing. You know, what's Nicole's perception of that?
Yeah, I think that is, you know, absolutely possible. And we have come across a few cases in our research work that sometimes people can get very wind up by the idea that they have to monitor their sleep. And I think a lot of time is because they're very conscientious people. They try to do things right, or simply because for understandable reason, they care about their sleep. They want it to be better. So it makes perfect sense that sometimes when our attentions go to the fact that, oh, we're not sleeping, or if you're focusing on the fact that I have to keep looking at the clock every now and then in order to produce the most accurate sleep diary for, let's say, the researcher, for the GP. And sometimes that could cause arousal, and so that could be counterproductive. And so for us, when we try to get people to engage in sleep monitoring, the baseline we do explain is that we don't want it to be sleep interfering, and we're not trying to go for the most accurate estimates in a sleep diary. We are actually wanting to see the perception of sleep. So for clock watching, we'll try to keep it minimal. In the past, I've done research when I ask people to clock monitor, it would just generate even more worries, more arousal, and actually makes people find it harder to go to sleep. So there are a few tricks that we can try to make sleep monitoring a little bit less burdensome. But if you find that from your experience, it is persistently interfering with your sleep, it may be a good idea not to do this that often, unless there is a purpose that makes you think that this is justified.
Okay, that's really, really helpful. I'm aware of kind of time moving on, aren't you, Anne?
Yes, I am. I was just wondering, is it possible that we could keep the chat and perhaps answer some of these queries later on?
Yes, we can indeed. So we're not,
you know, perhaps you and I can look at them and see what, and anything we can't deal with, ask Nicole later at a later date.
Yeah.
Is that, would that be okay?
Brilliant, brilliant. And we'll pull in more things shortly. So that sounds grand, Anne. Absolutely great. So if we hand over to the team, and I think, is it Jenna next? Yeah, who's going to share very much more about the practicalities of sleep monitoring.
Yes, so hi everybody. I'm actually going to hand over to Christy first.
Okay.
So Christy, if you'd like to explain to us a bit more about sleep tracking gadgets.
Yes, thank you very much, Jenna. So we hope that that may have gotten you excited to perhaps use some gadgets or methods of tracking your sleep, or maybe look into it a bit more. And we totally appreciate that it can be a bit overwhelming when it comes to choosing what sort of device or method to use. So we just wanted to have a quick run through of some of the devices and methods that are available today. So there are plenty of different ways to track your sleep, and all will give you slightly different insights and tips on how to improve your rest time. So starting from the top, going clockwise, you may already have a smartphone available. So there are some apps that you can download that can record different things, such as sounds like snoring or breathing through the night. So they use your microphone, and they give you an estimation of sleep based on that. They can also track some movement, although they do not tend to be as accurate as some of the other devices that you wear on your body. So most sleep tracker devices are actually worn around your wrists, and they monitor your sleep or your body movements as you sleep to determine how much time you've probably spent awake versus asleep. And I say probably because, as Nicole already mentioned, they have some difficulties when it comes to tracking your sleep, in that they are not always sensitive to your wakefulness. So they can't always accurately decide when you are awake or when you're just lying very still, staring at the ceiling. So there are some difficulties around using that. So if you don't like the idea of wearing something around your wrist, there are even devices or rings that you can wear that are a bit more subtle, and they also can also track your movement. And some of these devices can even track other mechanisms in terms of your heart rate, and they are thought to reflect the activity of your autonomic nervous system, and it can give you an indication of when you're awake, and also different stages of sleep. Some of these also can also measure your oxygen in your blood. And a dip in oxygen levels, for example, can be associated with sleep apnea. And of course, if you have any suspicion that might be the case, then always consult a professional. Now, there are also sleep tracking pads that you can put under your mattress, and they also measure your movement. Some also records body temperature, and they are also they can also give you an indication of different stages of sleep. And then there's also recently devices been released that measure EEG. They use EEG electrodes to measure brain activity, so they are more similar to what is sometimes used in sleep labs, and these include like headbands, for example, or devices that you can place on your ear. So if we go to so just lastly, so just when you think that you may need a very fancy device for tracking your sleep, we also like to remind you that a good old pen and paper can do the trick. So actually using a paper diary or using an app that serves as a diary because research has actually shown that it can be a very, very valuable tool for tracking your sleep, and it can actually give you a very good idea of your sleep habits and identifying any sleep problems. And often in research, there is a combination of using some of the wrist-worn devices as well as paper diaries that Nicole also alluded to. So if you are in the market for a sleep tracker, there's quite a lot to consider. And just bear in mind that the sleep tracking market is $1 billion industry. So every month or so, a new gadget will be released to the market with which will have just another new sort of trick or gadget that you can use. So it sort of depends on what kind of information you want to access, but also what service purpose it will serve to you. And of course, so there's still a difference in terms of the validity between the different devices. Some of them have not been scientifically tested, and so it's not always the case, unfortunately, that these commercial devices are as rigorous as some of the others, or some of the ones that we use in research, certainly. So the question then is, do you want just a sleep tracker, or do you want something that tracks or gives you more information? And how do you want to use it? Do you want it to use it throughout the day, or do you just want to use it during your sleep? But at the end of the day, as it was already mentioned, brought up before, if it gives you more stress, then it sort of, if it's not helpful, if you don't find it helpful, if it's making you worry, then it might not be something for you to use, or you might want to look into using something different or different methods. So Jenna and Paige have kindly put some of advisors to the test, and they will now both talk about their experience using a sleep tracker, what kind of information it gave them, and how it matched up with their personal experience of sleep.
Thanks, Christy. So myself and Paige, as Christy said, have been, we piloted 2 devices. So in the red corner, we have the Fitbit Alter, which is a wrist wearable health tracking device with the function to track your sleep. And this goes alongside the Fitbit app, which you can access like on your mobile phone or tablet. Whereas in the blue corner, we have Paige's Apple Watch, which is a Series 6 version and is compatible with Apple devices only. The reason that we tested these 2 specific devices is because, one, they happen to be 2 of the most popular forms of wearable sleep tracking technology that are out there today. And 2, and primarily this reason, to be honest, it was purely because these are the ones that we already had down to our personal preferences. I actually permanently borrowed mine from my mum, so thanks, Mum, for that. But yeah, so that's the reason that we decided to do these 2 devices specifically. And so we're going to face them off now for you and give you the lowdown on these different devices and how they functioned in terms of our sleep tracking. So we both used them for the same week on a period of 7 to 8 days and have compared our experiences. So I'm up first with the Fitbit Alter. So some of the key features of this device is that it functions both as a normal watch and a general kind of sleep and health tracker. With this particular model, its sole function is to help you monitor and track your general physical activity, health and sleep. So that's kind of all it does. And it does this by measuring in raw form your heart rate and your physical activity or movement. The Fitbit then uses validated algorithms, as Nicole's already gone through, which you can also find out more about within the app itself, to track your sleep and when you wear the watch to bed. It can also register naps and short sleep periods, which is something that not all devices are very good at, but you do get much less information if it's a short sleep period. So after you wear your watch to bed when you sleep, then you have to just sync it to your Fitbit in the morning or when you wake up, and the app will show you all the information about your previous night's sleep. So when you wake up in the morning or after your sleep period, this is what you will see. So the first bit of information at the top here is your overall sleep score, and this is out of a total of 100. And this sleep score is kind of calculated based on your own personal sleep goals. So for me, in this example, I set my sleep goal to an 8-hour sleep period. And your score is then calculated based on the amount of hours sleep that you got. So this isn't necessarily an indicator of the quality of your sleep, and your own recollection might differ from that. But as a quick kind of go-to score to look at across time, it can be useful in some instances. So you also then have your total sleep duration, just in hours and minutes. And if you scroll down a little bit further, you get the amount of time spent in each of the sleep stages. So the sleep stages that the Fitbit particularly measures is wakefulness, or the time that you're awake, REM sleep, and then light sleep and deep sleep. So that links to what Nicole was talking about earlier as well. There is also the option to pay for a subscription to Fitbit Premium, which obviously comes at an extra cost. I didn't do this when I was piloting the Fitbit, because I wanted to see what you could get just for kind of face value after already purchasing the device. But you can make this subscription and then you get some extra information such as your heart rate when you're sleeping and restlessness as well. And then at the bottom here, we have the bedtime and wake time. And then you also get a nice pretty graph to show you your sleep patterns. Now this graph is something that is particularly interesting. So if we zoom in on the graph a little bit, you can see a few more extra details. So you can see here that everything is kind of color coded as to the different stages of sleep. And you may be surprised to see that there are lots of little faint pink lines on my sleep period. Now, this is something that is actually perfectly normal, as Nicole mentioned earlier, but it can often surprise people when they see that and they think, oh my goodness me, I was waking up so many times in the night, my sleep must be terrible. So it's not necessarily something that is, you know, indicative of a poor sleep period, but it can be useful for you to see kind of how long those little flickers are and when you're waking up in the night. Another really useful feature is the averages for other populations that are relevant to you. But I think, you know, especially me being a researcher, these are very, 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 very basic demographics. So, you know, it's not like entirely relevant to everybody. And then just one other thing I'd really like to mention is if you're not hitting your sleep averages, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not having good quality sleep. So as you can see in the picture on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see from that kind of overview of different sleep periods, I only actually hit my sleep goal on 2 of the nights, which is where the little green stars are. But you can still see that, you know, the scores vary from night to night. So it's kind of, as Nicole said earlier, it's good to give you kind of an overview of things. But if you wanted more in-depth information, then you'd have to sort of click into each of those individually. So just to summarize all of that, some pros and cons to my time using the Fitbit. So first, the pros. One thing that was really apparent is that the information was very openly accessible as to how the sleep scores and the information is actually calculated, which is not always something that is guaranteed with these devices and apps. You also got lots of detail about your sleep that was freely available to users, and the sleep stages were well explained and tracked quite accurately. The sleep score was a fairly useful indicator of overall sleep performance, and I liked that you could personalize your different goals and sleep schedules for different days. And overall, I think it was a very sort of user-friendly interface within the app, and it updates very regularly as well. There were some cons though. So in order for you to have those really nice pretty graphs with all the details about your sleep, you have to have at least 3 hours in a single sleep period. Now, this can be a drawback if you are, you know, someone that sleeps kind of intermittently as and when you can. but you do still get some information. And I must stress that not all devices would even pick that up. So for me, I did think this was on the whole a good thing, but it is a con in terms of where you have to have at least 3 hours to get the detail that someone might be wanting. And then my last con was just that obviously to have to purchase the extra Fitbit Premium subscription in order to get some of the extra information as well.
So the next device that we reviewed was the Apple Watch Series 6, as Jenna mentioned, and I'm sure many of you know that the Apple Watch is essentially a smaller mirror image of your phone, but it's on your wrist, so you get all of your messages, you can change your music, you can do lots of things on your watch. But how does the Apple Watch actually track your sleep? Well, there are 3 simple steps to follow. First, you must ensure that your watch is more than 30% charged, and your watch will kindly prompt you to do this. Then all is required is for you to wear the watch to bed. You don't have to press a button or anything. It's that simple. And then finally, when you wake up, all that's left to do is open the sleep app either on your watch or on your phone to find out more information about your sleep. So what does the sleep app tell you? Well, it shows your average time in bed compared to your average time spent sleeping. It highlights periods that you are awake during the night. It shows your heart rate during your sleep period from the previous night, and it compares your sleep trends over the past month. And on that screen, you can just see a little example of how the sleep app shows up on your watch. So here it's a bit more in depth. The first image on the left shows my sleep from the previous week, and this is from the app version on the phone. You might notice that the first 2 bars on the graph are faded, and this is because I didn't wear my watch to bed on those nights, and I think it was because I forgot to charge it even though I was prompted earlier in the day. And the main reason is I like to use my watch to track my activity during the day, so then I have to remember to charge it before I go to sleep and then again when I wake up for the next day. So that's why they're not filled in. But on the next 5 graphs, lines on the graph, you can see that there's bright blue lines, and that's where I was asleep. And then the faded lines on the graph are either when I was in bed but not yet asleep, or when I'd woke up in the night. The next image shows my heart rate during my sleep from the previous night, and you can see that fluctuated throughout the night when I was in different stages, but it didn't tell me when I was in the different stages, so I can't actually compare that. The third image shows my sleep trends from the previous month, and again you can see here I chose not to track my sleep for the full month, and as I said, it's just mainly because I like to wear my watch in the day and I just needed to remember to charge it. But it is good that it still calculates an estimated time that I was asleep, and this is calculated from the activity on your phone. So I think that if you're active on your phone, obviously it thinks you're awake. If you then put your phone to one side and don't touch it again till the morning, it takes it that you're asleep. Obviously not as accurate as the watch, but it's still nice that it tries to estimate that for you. And then the final image just shows a comparison between the last night's sleep and then the previous night to see how they compare. How can we use the sleep app to improve our sleep? Well, like with Fitbit, you can create bedtime schedules and personalize your sleep goals. So the first image shows that the clock is highlighted orange. And this is because I set my sleep goal to be an 8-hour sleep period, but the schedule I've set is only for 7 hours 55. So it's just prompting me to try and change my schedule. And then on the next image, because I've changed it to an 8-hour period, it's not orange anymore. And then the last images show how you can personalize your sleep schedule for different days in the week. So in my example, I set one schedule for Monday to Friday, and then just a slightly later schedule for Saturday and Sunday. Another thing that Apple have incorporated is some sleep articles, and I thought this was really good because not everyone knows why sleep is so important, and also not everyone knows how we can try to improve our sleep. So Apple have provided 2 articles, one that explains why it's so important to get good sleep, and then the next one, how can we do that? How can we try and improve sleep hygiene? Of course, there were some pros and cons. The pros, I thought personally that Apple Watch well reflected my sleep. This is just based on my personal recollection. So I know that on nights when I woke up to perhaps get a drink or pop to the toilet, it then was picked up on my Apple Watch. And so I felt that it was accurate. It vibrates in the morning when your alarm is due to go off. And I thought that was a really nice, less intrusive wake up than an alarm blaring. It also takes into account when you take off the watch. And as I mentioned they've tried to incorporate ways to help you improve your sleep. But of course, there are cons. It doesn't explain what the data means or how it is collected. And even though I tried to do some investigation to find this out, there just wasn't a lot of information that explains how Apple actually collect this data and how you can interpret it as the consumer. It also doesn't tell you when you're in different stages of sleep, although I think you can download another app that will tell you that, but similar to Fitbit, you have to pay. And then the final point is, if you were just looking for a device to track your sleep, an Apple Watch is very expensive, and I personally wouldn't have bought one just to track my sleep.
I am conscious of time, so I think, yeah, Paige, if we just whiz through this next bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is just our verdict based on what we felt. Both of them, you could create personalised goals to meet your sleep aims. We thought they were both reliable and both user-friendly based on our experiences. However, Fitbit provided sleep stages but no heart rate, whereas Apple provided heart rate but no sleep stages. And then this is where Fitbit kind of took the lead. It provided a wider range of sleep data available and a wider range of products to choose from. And finally, one of the most important factors for us was that Fitbit provided more information on how your sleep scores and data are calculated, and then explanations on what that means. But obviously, this is just based on our personal experience of using two devices, and it's not to say if you have another device, it wouldn't still be valuable to use.
So I think this next slide, I think Christy or Paige, or not. Anyone want to jump in?
I'm happy to. Well, just want to say that, well, this is just a very fun exercise that we came up with the idea that, well, let's compare two watches for you, because sometimes reading reviews is very onerous. So we have done a fun exercise for you. We're not endorsed by any commercial companies for doing that. So this is just the verdict based on Paige and Jenna's personal experience. So thank you for doing the piloting for us. So here's just a page. If you're interested, we can share the slide later to say that there are actually some more robust scientific validation or comparison of different gadgets. Generally speaking, the result of this consumer grade gadgets are mixed, but they have improved quite a lot. They've come a long way since the development of the research grade actigraphy that we normally use in research setting. Essentially, because of the incorporation of different kind of sensors like heart rate monitoring that they have already talked about, it does help with increasing the accuracy of the prediction. So they have been doing some good work, but I wouldn't say that we are at a stage where we will be relying on commercial grade gadgets to provide you information. And also, one of Paige's slides reminds me that, oh, if the watch is constantly telling me that my sleep is terrible, or my sleep is not as long as what happened the night before, that could actually give you a panic attack, or at least give you some anxiety. So we will just go back to the emphasis that don't let sleep monitoring interfere with your sleep. If that is happening, perhaps it's not a good idea to persist. We usually recommend using sleep monitoring for a purpose and for a strict period of time. And in fact, I understand that sometimes it could get into the way, but there has also been the positive side of sleep monitoring. When people are monitoring the sleep, and if they're using this feedback according to what they want to do, that could potentially help them to improve their sleep. And it has been documented in scientific research. So we're happy to share with you that. So I guess coming to the last part Francis, if we may, is just to briefly talk about the studies that we are doing at Warwick. If you are interested, just only a few slides, not too long. And this part, Christy will be taking the lead.
Yes, thank you, Nicole. So as part of the Within project at Warwick, we actually have a specific sleep tracking study, and it allows us to examine in the real world the possible day-to-day interactions of different things. So we'll be looking at sleep, physical activity, behavior, and distress, and we want to know how they are related to chronic pain. And we use an Adaptability watch as well as sleep diaries. And we hope that this will answer some clinically relevant questions of how these factors may change over time. So we would ask participants to take part for a 7-day duration, and how these factors might sort of impact the individual, how it may impact your pain. So it's quite, it gives us a lot of information that we will normally get from using other methods of sort of a day, visiting the lab or things like that. We have already recruited over 500 participants with chronic pain, and we're just looking for the final few to take part in our study. And we, of course, understand that we're asking quite a lot from people in terms of time, resources. So especially if you are experiencing pain or have struggle with sleep. So the study is done completely remotely, so it doesn't require you to visit the university. And we also have a lovely team on call who will be able to guide you through all the different steps involved. And we are very aware of issues like confidentiality, and we always conduct our research in line with GDPR. So yeah, your personal data will be protected at all times. And because it's such a time commitment, we will also reimburse you for your time and give you a overview of your sleep once you complete the study, which should hopefully give you a bit more information. And so Jenna and Paige are going to briefly talk a bit more about the study, very briefly. But if this is something that you are interested in and you have the ability to take part, then please let us know, get in touch, and we would be happy to give you some more information.
Yeah, so as part of our sleep tracking study, we offer a personalised breakdown of your sleep at the end once we've received the watch back. So just briefly, each graph shows a 24-hour period on a single row, and this is some of my data that I tested out. So the blue lines here are indicators for when you press the button on the watch, just to indicate that it's lights out, and then when you've woke up in the morning. The black lines indicate activity levels, so the higher the peaks, the more intense the activity, and we use this activity to determine periods of wakefulness during your sleep, as well as how active you've been in the daytime. And finally, the yellow lines indicate light recording or lux, and this was actually taken in winter months, which explains why there's only one yellow line on that graph. And to go with this, we provide a summary table of your sleep from the tracking period. So this just details the lights out time, what time you felt asleep each night, how long it took you to get to sleep each night, what time you woke up and what time you actually got up, the duration of your overall sleep period, and then the total time awake during the sleep period. And then finally, we show you the number of sleep interruptions, but as mentioned earlier, it's obviously very normal to wake up throughout the night. So don't be alarmed if you see numbers like 46 on there.
Yeah, so just to kind of summarise, this sleep tracking study is 100% remote access because obviously with COVID, we had to adapt to things. So you can sit from the comfort of your own home and still participate in this study, which, you know, we're really happy to be able to bring you. If you are interested, there is a very, very short screening questionnaire that we do ask everybody to complete just to make sure that everyone is eligible. So the QR code on the screen now will take you to that. And I believe with some of the stuff that's on the Live Well with Pain and Footsteps Festival web pages, the links will all be there, so don't worry too much. And of course, if you do want some more information, we have a website. If you just Google us within study and then follow the links through to the University of Warwick psychology pages, you'll find us. And we're a very friendly team, so do just drop us an email or give us a call as well, and we'd be absolutely happy to answer any questions or concerns that you might have.
Excellent, excellent. And I have to say, I'm overwhelmed with the number of people who are interested in participating in the study, because I think they're already sharing some really interesting aspects about sleep. Frances, my namesake, was reporting in the chat that she is needing to be reminded to go to sleep, as she's very much a night owl. So if it's all right with the team, we'll just spend a few minutes now taking some questions. And Anne's been working hard in the background there. So can I put things over to you, Anne, to pick things up? Aha.
Sorry. One of the things that's come up is to do with refreshing versus unrefreshing sleep, or quality of sleep. How do you define what is a good night's sleep? For example, is it the amount of hours you're asleep, or is it a period of time within that sleep? And why is it that sometimes people think they haven't had a good night's sleep, but if they're using an app or a watch or something, it says that they've had more sleep than they actually think they have, and a better quality?
Okay, let me try again. Thanks, Anne, and thank you for the person who asked this question. I think this is an excellent question because you've just touched on a mystery of medicine. Because I think there is no perfect answer to this question. We are still trying to run some studies to try to understand what constitutes people's sleep quality. But I can tell you a few things based on our research. First of all, for sleep quality, there has been multiple attempts by various leading research groups to find biomarkers. Yesterday, I was actually sitting on a table with, virtual table, with lots of European sleep research group leaders, trying to see if we could promote the use of polysomnography a little bit more in our research. But anyway, one of the discussion points is that we are currently not at a stage where we know what would be the best marker of people's sleep experience. So it's actually impossible to say that, well, I measure this particular parameter, and then I can tell you your sleep quality. And so that is the reason why at the beginning of the introduction of this presentation, I was trying to emphasize the fact that there are different facets of the whole sleep experience. Apart from getting the estimates from the gadgets, it is actually really important to listen to what people have to say about the experience. And that is an important aspect of the whole sleep experience. So when we do studies in a very controlled setting, what we understand about the sleep quality rating from people is that there are so many different things that could predict that sleep quality rating, whether or not it is going up and going down. And it doesn't only include what happened during the night. It could also include what happened after the night of sleep. In the morning, the non-specific feeling that you get as soon as you wake up, whether or not you feel fatigue, whether or not you feel a lot of pain, your mood in the morning, your physical activity level in the morning, etc. So basically what we are suggesting from that particular research is that sleep serves a purpose to help you to function during the day. And the way how we give a rating of the sleep quality sometimes depends on what we can do and what we feel during the day. So there are a whole host of different factors being combined for us to make the judgment. And so it is a very complex process. And sometimes because of the integration of the different sets of information, that could create variation in our own sleep quality judgment. So that's one thing. And also, if we ask people repeatedly to give us the sleep quality rating during the day, multiple times, 8 or 10 times during the day, it actually does change, despite the fact that the sleep didn't change at all. And we have found out that it is not a memory problem. People change the way how they think about the sleep because of what they do during the day. And also the way how they put different weight on different factors changes all the time. And so that is really tricky, isn't it? Because it keeps changing. And so we are moving with a lot of moving pieces. So sleep quality is actually a much more fascinating concept than sometimes people think, like just one item asking people sleep quality. But there's a lot of interesting psychology going on. So to come back to the question, there could be discrepancy between what is being measured and what is how you feel. And so it is important that we address both in the treatment process.
One of the other questions that came up, and I think I'd like to know this as well, is Susie asked, what does it mean if her oxygen level drops below 90%? Is it something she should be worried about, or would that be normal?
Right, okay. So for the oxygen level, this is usually something that concerns with people with breathing difficulty. Francis, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so there's a medical condition called sleep apnea, and this is a disordered breathing problem during the night. So if people are not taking in enough oxygen, the oxygen saturation level will go down. So if it is below 90, that means that you're not breathing in properly and you're not supplying oxygen to the brain. And that is not a good thing, because that is what we call sleep apnea, be it central or be it obstructive. No matter what is the cause of the sleep apnea, it is something that perhaps should go and speak to the doctor about. It could have an impact on your sleep pattern. It could also have an impact on your heart. And so this is not something that we would take it lightheartedly. And we would normally recommend people, if the device is powerful enough to give them the oxygen saturation rating, do go and speak to a doctor, because it is good for not just only the brain health, but also the heart health.
Yes, Nicole, and thank you for the question. I think that one of the issues that's missed with people with pain is that as one puts on weight, becomes inactive because one's struggling with managing the pain, and you may have other long-term conditions, then actually sleep apnea can also be a problem too. And I put in the chat some information for you to look at. And the reason I emphasize it is often my colleagues miss it. And it's a condition that can be very well treated and improve your sleep in very positive ways, and also your life and your pain. So it's, you know, this is the good news. And I think we've probably got time for one more question. So is there anything that's coming in from Hilary? I noticed she was saying that she's been asking for asking questions.
Sorry, I didn't always write. Yes, Hilary. She wants to know, how can you be informed, you know, if you're sleeping badly, how does it, you know, is it called unrefreshing sleep, or is it, well, it, you know, what does it do to you, in as much as how does it influence your well-being?
Usually, the first thing that people notice when they're not sleeping well is that they become very grumpy in the morning. And it is in the scientific literature that the effect of sleep deprivation, very short sleep duration, the first thing that hits you is actually on your mood. So your mood will become low, And there's a strong link between persistent sleep problems with depression and all kinds of emotional disorder. And in fact, in the last decade, so much research has come in to suggest that if you're not sleeping well, or if you are not prioritizing sleep well, such that you have an excessively short duration, like less than 5 hours per day for a long period of time, it will increase the chance of you getting a lot of chronic health conditions later on. And that could be from, all kinds of heart disease, diabetes, the metabolic kind of disease, and then even for the brain, like dementia. So there has been some link suggesting that the two are linked. If you're not sleeping well, that could affect your brain health, your body health, and also your emotional health. And so the link between sleep disturbances and all kinds of mental health issues. So that is the reason why we thought that it is really important to emphasize the importance of sleep and the role of sleep play in the regulation of our health. In the current sort of economic climate, I know that it is really difficult, the work pressure, the stress, etc. But we mustn't forget that we need to prioritize our sleep. And so we're just trying to preach that to the wider community, because sometimes when we work with businesses, employees, employers in the region, sleep doesn't really come across as something that they should prioritize. And in fact, sometimes the culture is suggesting that if you sleep a lot, that is a weakness. And in school, we are trying to say, well, maybe we should prioritize sleep to such an extent that we delay school starting time, because they notice that for children, it is natural for them to delay the sleep rhythm. I think I noticed one of the comments here in the chat box that, oh, I'm a night owl. Yes, we have individual differences in the way how we prefer our sleep timing. And for a lot of teenagers and adults, and I think including my students in universities, lots of them prefer not to attend 9 o'clock lectures. So maybe it is helpful to delay the timing a little bit so that we can help them to function better during the day. Shift work in our modern society is causing a lot of problems, and we know that lots of people doing shift work would have a higher chances of getting cancer as well too, and possibly down to the disturbance to the circadian rhythm. So with all these different sort of evidence coming through, we understand today that sleep is linked to our health, so much so that we need to give sleep some proper recognition.
Just going on from that, what Hilary has also said is, how can having numbers and percentages make any difference to her sleep pattern?
Okay, yeah, that is a very valid question, because it's mind-boggling when you look at the numbers and percentages and you don't know what to do with them. But that sort of numbers and figures will give us the information about your sleep, roughly. And even though there are some errors, but within the same person, so if we monitor it across time, we can make some valid comparison looking at changes. And these kind of changes could help us to, first of all, start planning our treatment. So in psychological therapy for sleep, getting the sleep diary, knowing the patterns of sleep is the starting point of how we help people to adjust the sleep pattern. So we will do it over 4 to 8 weeks with the participants or the patients to help them to regulate their sleep, manipulating different processes. So having that number, percentages, figures, they are knowledge, they're information, so they are power to help us to find ways to get in, to shortcut, to address the vicious circle.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions we have time for this evening. Would you like me to wrap up, or do you want to wrap up, Francis? Right. Well, I'd like to thank Nicole, Christy, Paige and Jenna very much for your presentation this evening. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure most of us have learnt lots new So that's very good. We've got quite a few people that are interested in getting in contact with you for the research, so that's good. I'd also like to thank from the Footsteps Festival, Dr. Francis Cole, Louise and Nikki for all their hard work in the background and one thing and another. And also I'd like to just remind people that if you think that the festival's doing some good, we do have a Just Giving page, because all of the sessions are free to access. So it would help us just to have a little bit of help financially, because everybody working on the festival is giving their time voluntarily. So thank you very much to Nicole and her team. You've been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you for having us. We really appreciate your coordination behind the scene. And I think the Footstep Festival is a great thing to have, and you're doing something very meaningful for the community.
Very much.
Thank
Thank
you
you all. Sorry, thank you all for coming, and
Yeah.
Francis.
Yeah, thank you.